Martin is the Chief Design Officer of Nike Inc. He oversees all aspects of product, concept, brand, and retail design. He's worked at Nike for 26 years, actually over 26 years, across many areas of the company for both men and women. Most recently, Martin held the role of Chief Design Officer for the Jordan brand, as it doubled its revenue and became the second largest footwear brand in the US. Yoon is the global women's curator for Nike and the creative director of her own brand, Ambush, and she is the designer for the Dior men's jewelry. Am I right about that? Not anymore. Okay, never mind. Strike that. So she has her own brand named Ambush, and today we're going to talk about design and athletes and collaborations and all those kinds of things that I know that everybody is very curious about with Nike. So Nike is famous for its mantra, if you have a body, you are an athlete. So that's everyone, right? At the same time, you guys work with some of the most elite athletes in the world. How do you make everybody feel the potential of those elite athletes?
Well, first of all, hey, true pleasure to be here. Always good to be in Paris. So thank you for having us. And to your question, for us, it really starts with the athlete. No matter what we do, it's not like, what am I going to draw today? It's what athlete problems am I going to solve today? And ultimately, it's the idea of narrowcast to broadcast. So you really are focusing on that specific athlete, and that can be the professional athlete or everyday athlete, but then with the intent to, from broadcast to ultimate broadcast.
And in your streetwear brand, can you tell us a little bit about what makes a streetwear brand? I know you're in a streetwear brand that's a very male-dominated world, the streetwear community, and you were a pioneer in the early 2000s in that space. Like, how did you approach being part of that community as a designer?
It's not an approach. I think it's about where you're from, and it's the community, and that's how you start. And not usually, but the genesis of streetwear came from a community and like-minded people, and fashion and clothing became an outlet to express what they were standing for, what they wanted to express. And there's enough people gathering, then it becomes a culture. So I think that we're in Paris and we're in capital of high fashion, and the term of streetwear gets a little bit skewed from a fashion journalism. But if you really come from the culture, it's more about like-minded people coming together and express what they wanted to do, and that's just what the roots of streetwear is. And that's
what were some of those things that they wanted to express that you felt you could do?
It can come down to music. We see fashion, because I think fashion plays a big role in forming a person's identity, but also it becomes a group's identity. It's the most easiest way to kind of showcase something without having to say it, because it's instant. You can read it and you know where you're from, and also it becomes a reflection of your background as well. So if you look at different cities, have a different way of dressing that express their own community. So having said that, I guess streetwear. I mean, let's talk about streetwear and Nike, because I think we go real far, actually. Because earlier on we talked a lot about collaboration and other panels and all this stuff. I think it's a good topic to move into that. Having said that, Nike's been around close to 50 years. And Nike actually created this blueprint of bringing it back to the street and tying to the sports and supporting those communities. So,
at the end of the day, I truly believe Nike sits at the intersection of sport, youth, and culture. Mm-hmm. We are at best when we are right in the middle. And maybe to use a sports analogy, the pivot foot will always be in sports. But then we pivot the other foot either into sports or into youth or into culture. And it's finding that right balance. And at the end of the day, I always believe a good Nike product has performance, style, and soul. And it's really the three of them. And if you don't have the three, it truly does not deserve a swoosh. And if there would be a photo finish between sports or performance and style, yes, performance would win. but by a hair. And the reason why style is so important is we hear it from our athletes themselves. They literally say, I had the opportunity to work with Serena and Maria or with MJ for the last 4 years, and they would tell you, I play better if I look better. So this goes inherently in what we do. And I think there's another key reason why I think style is so key, because let's face it, right? We are building arguably products that are commodity, a shoe and a t-shirt. So how do you go from commodity to identity? Well, I think one, you build meaning into it, you build purpose into it, that's the new and better, and style. That is how you translate from a commodity to a literally identity. And I think that is ultimately what we are focusing on a day-to-day basis.
Can you think of a specific shoe or a specific item that you think you've done that with, where you thought, how am I going to imbibe this with just enough, or just a little bit more and take it over the edge?
It's, over the last 4 years within Jordan, that is, you think about it, right? It's literally epitomizes a brand. You epitomize a person. You're trying to capture what he stood for, which is the idea of excellence, the idea of literally not just creating a great product, but making you feel as if you would fly. And that's the magic in all of this is, and quite frankly, this is why I get to work every day, is not just to design another footwear and apparel. Don't get me wrong, I love doing that too, but with the opportunity to work with the Make-A-Wish Foundation kids. And those are dying kids. And their last wish is to spend time with the Jordan design team. And I would get it if they would say, I want to spend time with MJ. That I would understand. But what they see within building a product is it's a symbol of hope, a symbol of excellence, and literally making people fly. So you don't come to work the next day saying, I'm going to design just another t-shirt or another shoe. It's to make people fly physically and emotionally. And I think that's the beauty in the business we're in. It's, yes, we create performance product, but at the end of the day, it's creating emotion that people can fall in love with.
Let's talk a little bit more about Jordan, actually. It's a very interesting business model, as we all know. It's not just sponsorship, it's athlete ownership. And that seems to be something that Nike is moving toward, or a lot of athletes are actually asking for more so than they did. Are there other examples of that on the horizon? Other things that you've participated in that you're interested in telling us about?
You want to go first? You know, I mean, we've been doing this for 40 years. Right? The Jordan brand is 40 years old, so it's not a new model. Now you can see it, that more and more athletes are building their own brand, but we've been doing it for 40 years. That is literally the essence. And I always say with Jordan was, before people were playing basketball, after Jordan people were living basketball. And there's a huge difference. And therefore, the products we did had to be as good on the court as off the court. A good Jordan product did both. And that was one of the essence of the brand. And trust me, he held us accountable to it.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure he was very involved. And you are also working with a couple of athletes, right, on some Nike collaborations?
Yes.
Are you allowed to tell us what they are?
Maybe towards the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I do have something coming up, but...
You can say it.
Really? You sure? Well, okay, there's one that's coming up end of the summer. I'm actually working on something special with Naomi Osaka for her U.S. comeback. So that's going to be a really special one. That's all I can say for now.
How long in advance do you start working on some of these types of projects? Like if you know she's making a comeback, have you been talking to her for a long time?
Well, usually it comes from the athlete themselves. Actually, the request came from her asking Nike to have me come in to design her looks, and then and we just found a way to kind of tie it to other collab that I was already working on with Nike. So we created a more versatile collection that's coming out of it to tell a bigger story of one woman's journey and how that plays in tennis as a sport. And yes, like Nike is a huge group, and there's so many items, and it does take like 1.5 to 2 years to plan. And that's something that we always talked about, how much we like live in everyone's future, because you see the product drop like that week, or you get the news that week, but it's something that we actually been living and thinking about and fixing for past 2 years that's coming to life. So just having sport as a core of the message of this brand, we never tried to chase like trend or anything. It's all about the story of like, what we're building with the athlete and through the products, and how we can withstand all that noise even 2-3 years from now on. And then what can stand last is the genuine story that we built together in that little collab that if you want to call it collab, or the coming together at that moment, and that makes it super exciting.
Maybe just to build upon that, I really believe we're living in the future. Right? I mean, we're already working on World Cup 26. We're already working on LA 28. Right? So yes, we can do products in 3 months, 6 months, etc. But to truly make breakthrough innovations, it takes time. I always say we're in a design business, not a miracle business. It takes time, and it's exciting. I cannot wait. I'm happy to talk to you all about the innovations that we have for the Paris Games, and I'm really excited to tell you what's happening for the LA Games. But it really that allows us to set trends versus chase trends. That does not mean that we can't be trend non-aware. We still have to be trend aware, but it also gives us an opportunity, if not the obligation, to be pioneers, step out, look of what's ahead. And the way we do this is by listening to the voice of the athletes. It's not just insights, they're foresights. And I give you an example. Eliud Kipchoge, probably one of the best marathon runners in the world, he said he had an audacious dream. He says, I'm going to break the 2-hour marathon barrier. And that's a journey that was, 8-9 years ago when we started this? And we're still at it to this day. But it's that insight of this audacious dream, and his dream become our dreams. So at the end of the day, we are in service of the athletes and help them to ultimately achieve their dreams. And so he was very specific on the goal. The way we approached it was sometimes you have to forget the past to create the future. If you look at the existing marathon shoes, and I used to be the creative director for the London Games, that marathon shoe was a Flyknit Racer. It was a super low profile shoe. And if you look at the marathon shoes now, it's a completely different form study. It's maximal, whereas before it's minimal, was maximal. Like, if you'd have told me ages ago, 12 years ago, that you would put airbags into a marathon shoe, I would say, not possible. But I love the idea that we are challenging our own biases, throw them out to achieve those audacious goals. You literally have to forget the past to create the future.
And I think the one more thing I want to add to this is that whatever we do, no matter what the product looks like, it's a performance, and it has to help them to perform better. So in order to make sure that performance elements there and fabrics to the execution, it will take time. Because it's not something that we just cut up and so on just for the facade of outside appearance. It's actually, they need to wear this to perform best they can on court or wherever they are going to be. And I think that's something that, you can't cut corners.
Mm-hmm. You live in Tokyo, Yoon.
Yes.
I'm curious about and we're in Paris, which is nice to be outside of America and outside of New York City, and our perspective globally, what inspires you guys? I know you're always looking at trends, you're always going around the world trying to source new materials and things like that. Aside from the athlete, what inspires you creatively?
People, actually. The reason why I love traveling and meeting people is just like, for me, it's like a data collection. Like, I don't like looking through the screen alone, because I think there's certain data you can collect from like looking at it. But actually just walking down the street and talking to people and also meeting people from different industries actually helps me to just open up my more than just like a fashion. And the way I kind of raised the brand that I have, I've always used it as a platform to exercise different ideas using what fashion could exist in these spaces. So what inspires me is that it's just traveling, meeting different people, and who can just like, educate me and open my eyes to different things.
Yeah, this one, I always say trends don't start at daylight, they start at midnight. And I really believe it. That is when you see
What do you
youth
mean?
culture.
Say more.
Youth culture, when you go and see how they express themselves, is at midnight, is when they go out. So that is one area that certainly, if you want to be looking to the future, this is one indicator. And so I do take my team to inspiration trips. And actually, we just came back from Japan. And I only have one rule. We'll do everything but look at shoes. Because otherwise, the human nature is if you see something you like, you're going to draw it again, subconsciously. So I much rather look at anything but shoes. So that could be architecture, it could be nature, it could be manhole cover for that matter. It really anything but. And then you take this inspiration, you come back to Portland, and it's kind of like you're on a sponge while you travel. And then when you come back to Portland, you kind of squeeze that sponge and through the filter of only Nike. And I think that is to create authenticity, but also distinction, it has to go this filter of only Nike. And I think that's the biggest compliment you can get when you put a shoe, an apparel, or a campaign in front of consumers, and the jaw drops, and they say, only Nike could do this. There's no other compliment that I'd rather get.
You have a background in design, and I think there's a parallel between design and athleticism in the sense that you're going for some kind of purity, some sort of never been seen and never been done before. What do you look for when you're hiring a designer, someone for your team?
One is the audacity to dream, and then the relentless pursuit of it. Because I think many people can dream, but you also need to put the time and energy into it to make this dream happen. I think those are the two ones, and I think it ultimately exemplifies in curiosity. So if you ask questions, and if you're really good at asking questions, you're going to be always learning. And so I'm less looking for people that have the solutions. I'm more interested in the person who is a quick learner and is interested in asking the right questions.
Great. Speaking of sort of innovative question-asking designers, I know that I believe it was Tinker Hatfield, the original designer who designed the Nike Air based on the Pompidou Center here, the Inside Out shoe inspired by the Inside Out Museum. And I know that you guys are having quite a bit to do with the Olympics and created a whole bunch of new Air type of products. You want to tell us a little bit about what Nike is doing here in Paris and how they're servicing athletes and also innovating on design?
Well, for one, as you said, Nike Air would not exist without Paris.
Did everybody know that? I didn't know that before.
Yeah, it was, speaking of inspiration trip, right? There's only so much you can do over internet, etc. It took Tinker Hatfield to be standing in front of the Pompidou, 37 years ago, whatever it is, looking at it in context of all the old buildings, and then seeing this new building that is built inside out, and literally showing the gut of it. And we had Nike Air for a while at the inside of the shoe, but we did not expose it. So he's like, well, what if we actually expose Nike Air, right? So literally the idea of visible air came from the Pompidou. And to this day, it's the best technology out there, full stop. Foam is good, air is better. And the rationale of that is foam ultimately will compress. Air is like the Energizer Bunny that will keep on giving. It's the same performance on mile 1, on mile 10, 100 or 1,000. It's still exactly the same. And I can't wait to see our athletes win on air. That will be, it's just already over the last 12 months, don't quote me, but I think it's about 13 world records. Over 9 of them were already done on Nike Air products. And I can't wait for the Olympics to start and seeing it, because ultimately that's what we do, is to create new products that literally propels them into the future. And we'll have over 100 federations here, hundreds of athletes, with an athlete house here where we can serve them from beginning to end, from before the game, during, but also during the competition, before the competition. We customize things for them. It's going to be bonkers.
I want to make sure I have time to. We leave time for you guys, and we're running. There is time for questions if you guys have any in the front row over here. If not, I have more questions. But is anybody back there?
I don't have a microphone, so I've got quite a lot of Sorry, my name's Tony Simpson from a company called Oliver Wyman. The reason I'm going to ask this question is I sort of lead their sport division, and one thing that's really important in sport is brand equity. And Nike saw a sort of 30% increase after your support with Colin Kaepernick. Do you think there's anything that fashion brands can learn from sports brands if they want to go into this market?
I think it goes back to be meaningful as a brand. To create distinction, you have to be meaningful. And this was a meaningful moment. And it's to stand up for your values and believing in it. And I also believe values drive value, ultimately. But I do believe that's where it starts, believing in your values.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was a panel earlier that talked about how a successful sportsperson can accelerate a brand's growth. And I was wanting to ask then, and especially now having heard you, do you have any statistics on how a brand partnership accelerates an athlete's growth through that confidence lift and that legitimization that you are somebody?
Let me check to understand the question in regards to partnering with other brands outside of Nike.
So no, if Nike does a deal with an athlete, do you have data that suggests whether they will perform better because of that deal with Nike, because that makes them more confident, it makes them feel a responsibility to be a successful athlete?
Of course.
Can you quantify that uplift?
I do believe it is for many athletes a dream to be part of Nike, right? It's basically, you got literally a check. But I think it comes down to, we have to earn that spot. It's not given. It's how we treat them. And most people believe that we use athletes for billboards and at the back end of the process. Yes, that's true too. But the most important part is up front. It's for them to give us the insights on how to make new and better products. It's working with them. Like literally, we would not start a product without speaking to them and listening to the voice of the athletes. So it's the entire journey, and that I think we make them literally part of the family. And we mention it as like, welcome to the family. And that's how it's being, we treat them that way at every step of the way.
I wonder if does the same apply to fashion brands that seek you out to work with you, like the small brands like Bodhi or Jacquemus, or, you know, a brand that may not have the name brand value of Nike. When they collaborate with Nike, does that give them a boost?
I think so. I think the beauty of collaboration is like two worlds coming together and creating something quite unique out of it. And like, now that you mentioned those brands like Bodhi and Jacquemus can bring certain world that Nike doesn't have, and Nike can bring certain technology and the things that they don't have, and we create the magics together, and that's the beauty of collaboration. And obviously, we don't just randomly pick people. We stick to people who are very genuine to their story, just like the athletes that we work with. So, and a lot of the collaboration that you've seen past 40 years, like, you know, it goes on the history for a reason.
Yeah, and hey, we've been working together with Yoon for 7 years now, right? So I think it's also building that relationship and believing in each other and pushing each other. because that's what best collaborations do. They open new spaces. If we collaborate with someone to go into areas we could not do ourselves, if it's just a trading of logos, I could not be more bored by it. And there's plenty of collaborations happening out there. So it better be something that is worth talking about it, worth creating, and that pushes them and us. And I think that's what's fun. And I think we have a wide range of from Bodhi to Yoon to Jacquemus to Travis Scott. But then you can go into artists as well. So for example, I'm really excited about the new sport that's being introduced in the Paris Olympics is breakdancing. Right, so there was a lot of energy around skateboarding in Tokyo Games. I think the same thing will happen with breakdancing in the Paris Games. And there we are working with Futura, so an artist that is true to the culture, and literally creating uniforms that don't really look like uniforms, which is even better, but it's right to those athletes. And for us, that was a new sport that we had to really dig in our Nike Sports Research Lab to learn about breakdancing, and creating shoes that are literally upside down. And you'll see a swoosh that is actually upside down too, because the shoe is upside down. It's those kind of things that I think help us. So collaboration with athletes, like a Jordan, but also with a wide range of entities that help us to be better.
All right, well, on that note, on the upside down swoosh, we will all look forward to seeing at the breakdancing competitions. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to bring Vanessa back.